Kia ora, everyone. I'm Mike Joy. Like Molly was working on electricity for 50 years. I've been working around freshwater for about 30, and I've failed like you failed with electricity. So, but yeah, we're fighting back. And I've got a whole presentation that I'm going to do with this when we go national, and kind of so I don't know whether to jump into what I'm going to talk about there, or I'm really happy to answer questions. I'm new to Tapatahi. I didn't know about it until I got invited to come here. I'm supportive of any movement. I see the crucial changes that we need to make, and I kind of make the message in my presentation that we're all here around climate change, but climate change is just one of multiple crises that are coming at us. And the good thing is that the solution to all of them is the same, right? So we have multiple crises that are caused by overshoot. It's all about overshoot. It's just extreme breaching of all the planetary limits. And so the reality of the future is we will have to stop growing. We will have to consume way less than we do now. It's really interesting to come to a place like Aotearoa East, where I used to spend a lot of time, but haven't for a long time. But there's kind of huge disparity in wealth that is in New Zealand, but globally as well. And I looked up the figures recently, and 50% of New Zealanders are in the top 10% of wealth. So the top 50% of New Zealand are the top 10% globally, which do more than 50%, actually probably closer to 75% of all the harm. 10% of New Zealanders are in the top 1% globally. So we are a wealthy country, and wealth comes with it. What comes with wealth is harm, and a lot of that wealth has come from destroying the environment here. Our biggest overseas earner, the backbone of our economy, is dairy farming, that I do a lot of work on, and we take fossil fuel derived fertilizer, and we take phosphate mined from around the world, but currently stolen off the indigenous people of West Sahara, and we're the only country in the world that takes this stolen property and brings it here and palm kernel from destruction of native forests in Indonesia to grow this milk, to grow grass, to make milk, which we then dry with coal mostly, and we export, where it mostly ends up as either junk food or infant formula in other parts of the world. Just to kind of hammer that home even more, is a little experience that I had a couple of years ago with one of my PhD students, a young woman from Vietnam, had a baby while she was here in New Zealand, went back, this is probably 2019 or 18 or something like that, to Vietnam, and she came back and told me how she had been breastfeeding in public and spat on and yelled at because the advertising, and she showed me, she translated some online adverts that they see over in Vietnam, and there's someone in a white coat, looking all official and telling them that infant formula contains all of these fantastic things that your baby has to have, and that breast milk is inferior to that. And so that's why she was being seen as a child abuser, because she was breastfeeding her baby. So we're part of that. This is what we're producing. We're destroying our rivers to be part of this, so that we can have the money to buy big utes and Teslas and big screen TVs to have. We have to think about that. About it's a Faustian bargain, I think, that we have to have our wealth, and so the future is changing somehow. That idea that gathering stuff. I mean, it's something nearly all of us were brought up with, this kind of belief that winners have, you're a winner if you've got lots of stuff. Loser, there's all these TV programs. I haven't watched TV for a long time, but I hear about these TV programs where you're the biggest loser or something like that if you don't have, or people accuse people of being losers if they don't have all this stuff. There's just so many changes that we need to make, and it's that growth paradigm, this idea that, and look at our government, it just endlessly talks about growth. The scariest thing possible for them is a decline in growth. So, a whole lot of these things that I've looked at with Tapatahi, including 4-day weeks are going to be part of this future where we consume less, we do less. This is always the hardest thing, when people ask for a solution, and I want to just harp on that there is no solution to climate change. It's not a problem that has a solution. It's a predicament. It's a predicament because we've overshot, so we don't think about it as a solution, but that our futures will be considered radical, but actually how we live now is radical. That's the hard bit to understand, that our lifestyles currently are radical. I'm doing a general we, as in, the way that we live. Obviously there's a big range in consumption, and some people who don't get to consume much at all, but that's kind of, there's a lot of spin industry, a lot of pressure to convince us. I see endless solutions coming up. People, all you have to do is this, or buy this, and I've got the answer to this, and it's all about some magic technical solution that's going to mean mining more stuff and more harm being done. And the hardest thing to get across is doing less, that we need to do less. There's no money in doing less. There's no you don't get to be an entrepreneur and sell some product, and it's a really tricky space. But I'm going to do a big presentation with some technical stuff in it. But I just thought maybe people have questions while I'm here. I don't know if we're all kind of the converted here or not.
Yeah,
we probably are. Yeah.
I have just a question about GDP and the way we think about GDP,
Mm.
and really I kind of think whatever happened to the wellbeing budget, which is a way of framing the things that are important to make us happy in life, essentially.
Yeah.
So what happened there? Why did we actually get back onto conceiving as GDP in this kind of growth?
It seems only to be used as indicators when they're doing the budget, and they don't apply it to a general strategy for moving forward on everything else.
No, but I don't know if you saw, there's a recently a paper that has shown that the best indicator of harm is GDP. We don't have to worry about environmental performance indicators and stuff. GDP is burning fossil fuels and is doing harm. But I'm also a bit concerned about well-being. I work in a building at the university where some person very high up in well-being in New Zealand, and his idea of well-being is being able to fly to the UK every year and having the batch at Wanaka and all of that kind of thing. So I'm really concerned about well-being, that well-being must be just clean water and a warm house and good healthy food. That's well-being,
Happy kids.
So we don't want to get caught up in happiness being collecting shit, and we need to nail that down. I think that's something that, because otherwise these people that like the one I'm talking about will see well-being and happiness as business as usual kind of thing for wealthy people. So it's a slippery one, and it's maybe well-being's been co-opted into that.
We also have a society where sickness is now seen as common, and that mental health is seen as everyone. Like, we have the most people ever using antidepressants and anti-anxieties. We have the sickest community that we've ever had before, yet apparently we have the best health system and the best medication and treatment out there. So this has this big question mark that no one asks, how come we are so sick? And our minds apparently are so sick.
I know, and that's always, that worries me, Jane, because what people do is, if you, having been involved in the debates recently between green growth and degrowth, you have to have this money to be able to build the hospitals, to have all the operations and things, but it's such a circular thing where all of this stuff is what makes us sick. I mean, I know it's kind of an anecdotal one-off example, but I spent some time in Romania on a sabbatical 10 years ago, and the people, the scientists I was working with, went to meet, I can't think of her name now, but her mother, who lived up in the hills and lived this very traditional Romanian lifestyle, and she was 68 years old, She had never been to hospital in her life, and she had never been to the dentist in her life. And she had marvellous teeth, and she was a bit stooped, but her you know, so yeah, it's this trap where we trap ourselves into needing more medication because of the lifestyles that we lead, trying to pay mortgages and to get caught up in this whole game. It's kind of getting out. Sorry, there's a guy at the back of the hand.
I'm interested to know whether, when we live in a democracy, whether the democratic political system is actually capable of staying ahead of or managing us through this crisis, because I can see that they're not doing.
No.
They're managing the middle line and not actually doing anything very significant.
No, and they're not going to, because it would be unpopular, and they'll be voted out tomorrow if they did any of the kind of things that we actually need to do. You know, I just have that little local example. I live in Pakakariki, but a friend of mine, Jenny Rowan, was the mayor of Kapiti, and she bought in water meters, you know, and it reduced water consumption, you know, significantly. But she was voted out, you know, straight away. That was just seen as, you know, so that's just something as light as that. So I don't think for a second that we can rely on government, and would be crazy to do that. I mean, maybe if we could improve democracy or make democracy real, then we might have a hope. But the current system that isn't democratic, and you know, then we're not going to get. It has to be ground up. It has to be things like Tapatahi and citizens, and you know, that make the change. And you know, this is the difference with Molly. And I was going to say this, that I started off doing local stuff, but I've had to move up to the higher level global stuff. And Molly's kind of gone back down to working with local communities, and that's, you know, that's where the real change happens. I know, and I totally accept that, but I'm still trying to bang on at that you know, bigger, higher level kind of what's happening globally, because it's climate change and all of these issues aren't local issues, they're global ones.
I just saw the film, it's a comment on what you're saying. I just saw the film The Endangered Species, which looks at the whole issue of this. And George Mombiak was also interviewed, and he really said that he'd been going for years and years. And it's so easy, he says, you can do X, Y, Z, it's all very logical. But he came to the conclusion it's just not going to happen at that top level. No. And he actually broke down into tears during the film and said, you know, the political will isn't there, and it's got to be kind of like, the whole film is really saying it's got to be bottom up, and we all have to get absolutely be soaked with the fact that we need to work with nature and not against it, and that has to be part of all our lives and how we do stuff. And that was the big message of the film, and I think that's what, and it has to come from the communities.
Yes, I think isn't that, I'm not a historian, but I'm pretty sure that any real changes come from the bottom up, not the top down. So only bad stuff's come from the top down.
I just wanted to ask a quick question of Molly, because I feel like there's a piece you haven't got to, which you've spoken to me about.
Yes.
And that's with the tiny forests, actually the effect on emissions, which you have talked about, how much CO2 that tiny forests absorb because of what you're describing. So I just wondered if you could fill people in on that, because it's such a crucial piece of what you're talking about.
Just to say that tiny forests are designed to emulate the Cretaceous, when you had huge amounts of CO2 absorbed by everything from tree ferns, giant tree ferns, on down to the tiniest plants. And they created an ice age from a very hot climate in a mere 100 million years. And the way to
That's nothing.
If
we start today, we should be right.
And yet, if you do the same thing that made the Cretaceous, you are absorbing, putting more biomass onto the ground than any pine forest or any energy forest. You're just building huge amounts of woody biomass. And it's just the experience. There's been some science done, but nothing like enough, because the scientists are not funded to do that. Scientists are funded to work out poisons and nutrients, to do conventional agriculture. So you don't get any scientific study to speak of, but by merely putting enough species together, all the way biology works together will give you massive growth. And it creates microbes which, when kids play in the dirt, they will pick up in their first 1,000 days enough microbes to create an immune system that will keep them healthy the rest of their lives. So one reason I believe that I am healthier, when I went for an operation for oral cancer, the people who looked at me said, "You're the healthiest person who's come through today." And that was my upbringing playing in the soil. Now we desperately need our babies, our pregnant women, our babies and our kohanga reo to play in real soil. That's why I am here today. Did that say something?
Paul, were you for me or for Molly?
Yes, no, well for you actually,
Right.
but I totally support what Molly said.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, about the minerals. We rely on minerals coming from elsewhere, and we're part of a military alliance. And the US and UK have, well, the US in particular, have fomented a huge number of coups in South America. Most recently, in the last decade, there's 5 military coups, or instigating them, from the United States. The most recent is in Peru, 6 months ago, where they've got a coup government and it's killing indigenous people who are protesting partly about the new lithium mines near Puno. And, basically they refuse to have new elections, and so they've said they'll have new elections in 3 years' time, and the US has just sent 100 troops to support the coup government in Peru. Obviously Venezuela, they've tried to undermine that, and Honduras, and Nicaragua, and Bolivia, managed to get back its elections, but and that was the same reason. It was to do with lithium mines. So basically, when we say we support democracy, how much we have in New Zealand is absolutely debatable, but we're not supporting democracies around the world at all. It's not people power, it's corporate power.
Yeah, but there's even big protests within the US over lithium mines and within the States
within the US as well, yes.
That's going to be the future. I mean, obviously, that social collapse and conflict between countries and within countries over these resources are going to carry on. That's my biggest fear, is that we switch from all of these wars being about oil to being now the minerals that we're going to play this game where we shift from a fossil fuel based energy system to a non-fossil fuel, and we're just going to shift from one disaster to another disaster, swallow a spider to catch a fly. And what Molly was saying about planting the trees, fantastic that trees are so important in so many ways that we couldn't even, begin to describe, but there's one dangerous tree out there, a really scary tree, and that's the tree that's planted to allow us to burn fossil fuels, that whole offsetting bullshit, this net zero thing that's totally at the heart of our response here in New Zealand to climate change, which is a complete scam. That we're talking about fossil carbon that was sequestered more than 65 million years ago. So the stupidity of thinking that we can mitigate that in our current carbon cycle is bizarre. We could plant the whole of the planet back in trees again, including every city and every town and everything, and replace the wetlands and things. And the estimates are somewhere between 7 and 9 years worth of our current emissions of fossil carbon. So what we would do if we did that, even, how impossible it would be, but if we did manage to do that, that would give us 7 to 9 years. And then we're just back to where we started again. We still haven't solved anything. All we've done is just put off not the reality for another few years. That's why we shouldn't get caught up in that track.
That's what the man from UNESCO in Holland, that
Yeah.
tiny forest has moved right across.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
at the end of his book, I've just read, he says, do not think that planting trees is the answer. It's
No.
one of the many things
Yeah.
you can do, but we've actually got to consume less. And all what you're
We've got to
saying-
stop burning fossil fuels. We can't do that with trees. They don't
No. No.
Trees work within a natural system.
Yeah.
We had a balance, but we can't play that game and keep doing the other thing.
Yeah.
So,
I was wondering, do you on that kind of global scale that you are in dialogue with, I'm wondering if there are any ideas around how to fight back or regulate advertising and that kind of thing, because it seems to me like this idea of well-being and all of these things, it's about what we're being sold.
No,
it's
no,
not
exactly.
about the personal choice. but it's
you'll
about
really
the
like this paper. We've just submitted a paper to Scientist Warning. If you haven't found it already, look for the Scientist Warning website, and there's a whole series of papers, and we've just submitted one on behaviour change. And what it talks about is, and if you haven't done it yet, look online for a American public broadcasting documentary called The Century of Self. It's a two-part thing. Fantastic story about Edward Bernays, who was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and he's pretty much the guy that started marketing in the world. Like he used some of his uncle's study and work to then work on how to market stuff. Anyway, our paper talks about that, but and a couple of the co-authors, Joseph Mertz organised this, and William Rees, that a lot of you will know, is a co-author on it, but a couple of the co-authors are really top level, like at the top of a couple of big ad agencies globally, and they've done a mea culpa. They know that they have created this thing. So going back to Bernays, he was one of the in the Stocko, if you watch it, one of the early examples they give is, I think it was 1910 or something in the States. He got a job working for the tobacco companies, and he sussed out that if you, I can't remember if it was a dead ball or it was in New York anyway, something where young women came out and they were all dressed. What was it?
Suffragette marches.
Oh no, there was something where they were really all done up. So he went to a few of these young women and gave them cigarettes with these stylish cigarette holders, and these young women who were on the front page of all the newspapers and things were smoking these cigarettes, and then within, I can't remember, 6 years or something, he doubled cigarette sales in the USA. And then he went on from that to just develop all of these things.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
How do we
Well, no, so
address it?
the guys that have written, that are
Is that
co-authors
no-
on this paper, they say that they think as marketers that they can undo it. They can build it, they can unbuild it. They can make having a big black ute not cool anymore, something that you feel, whakama about having, that big thing, and gathering all this stuff isn't something to be proud of anymore. They're convinced they can do it. I don't know, but I do see, I try to pull apart how much of it is innate for us to want to have all this stuff,
But
and
how
how
do you
much of it's
overcome
because we're kids. How you
Social media.
social media, all that advertising and stuff, yeah. Should I,
We need to have a break.
I need to make a public announcement.
I needed to get on that.
No, but you're not going to keep talking, but I need to talk first. For a little bit. Just a couple of announcements.
Is this a commercial?
Well, kind of. Like, at 3:30 we're scheduled to join this big thing when Michael gets his 10 minutes. His 10 minutes don't come till after 4 o'clock. And I just want you to know that one thing is that the fruitcake out there hasn't got any butter and milk in it, but it has got eggs in it. So you're welcome to have some fruitcake. I'm just suggesting that now you might want to get some refreshments because soon you'll be
The
tied
film's
up
going to start.
for quite an extensive period. Also, I've handed out a few of our pamphlets. But by the door you'll find some pamphlets you could have a read of. We're a bit light on resources. And there's some brown paper on the table around there. If you've got ideas about Tapatahi and how you think it might assist you or you can assist it, that's a place where you can write write your opinions. And then there'll be a bit of time after this long thing, after 5, when does it end? 5 o'clock.
You're really selling it.
But we're interested, we'd like to keep in touch if people want to. If you've got ideas about what you've heard, Molly's got some fantastic stuff there that's local. Kelly's got stuff that can give us more say. The world doesn't have to be like it is. It's only like it is because we live it. You know, it works because we put up with it. We've grown up with it. We put up with it. We don't have to. So there must be ways where we can together make it better. Anyway, you're welcome to keep talking here, but just I would recommend you get it at some stage. Get some liquid in before the South American stuff.